Okay, this is Barbara Elistad with Mesquite Citizen Journal, and we're here this morning with Ryan Toone. And,
Good morning.
and he is running for Justice of the Peace in Mesquite in the general election that's coming up in about 4 or 5 weeks. So you were just mentioning that it's been a long process. You've been on the campaign trail, so to speak, since January. So as an introduction, talk a little bit about what the Justice of the Peace position does. You know, we've heard it before, but I think it bears repeating just to remind people what the position is all about.
Thanks. The Justice of the Peace is a limited jurisdiction judge, which means that it's a judge that has the opportunity to fulfill requirements that are given by the state legislature. A Justice of the Peace has responsibilities with both criminal and civil cases.
Okay.
With criminal cases, the Justice of the Peace has a responsibility to assist with gross misdemeanors and felonies and handles the initial stages of those types of cases. That's dealing with setting bail, arraignments, appointing counsel, and also preliminary hearings. And these are evidentiary hearings where evidence is presented to the Justice of the Peace. Both the defendant's attorney are there, the prosecutor's there, and there's a determination made after the evidence is presented to see if there's enough evidence for the case to proceed to a trial in district court. A Justice of the Peace also has jurisdiction over misdemeanor cases.
Okay.
With respect to the civil cases, a Justice of the Peace handles small claims court, which are disputes that can go up to $7,500. And these are disputes that are handled in a relatively informal manner. Often these are instances where people do not come in with attorneys. Justice of the Peace can preside over civil disputes with a maximum amount of $10,000 in dispute.
Okay.
There's also a Justice of the Peace will get involved with issuing protective orders in domestic violence types of cases, harassment, those types of things. Justice of the Peace will review and determine whether it's appropriate to sign a search warrant.
And that would be for our local police?
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
A Justice of the Peace can also marry somebody.
Okay.
So those are the types of things that Justice of the Peace will be involved with doing.
Okay. You mentioned domestic violence. Talk a little bit about your philosophy on handling domestic violence cases, the restraining orders and things like that. It's probably one of them. I know, talking to the police, it's the most dangerous situation that they ever face is walking into a potential domestic violence case. But talk about your philosophy of how you view the victim versus the perpetrator. How do you balance the emotional conflict between the two?
Good question. As in my position as Deputy City Attorney, I've had the opportunity to work on hundreds of domestic violence cases, and it is a real problem. As a Justice of the Peace, these cases may go to municipal court if it's a first or second offense. If it's a third offense, it would go through justice court, and Justice of the Peace would be involved with some of the things I just talked about, reviewing whether there's sufficient evidence, setting bail. The state has set parameters for how to sentence somebody in these types of cases, and there is some deference given with respect to fines and jail time. There's court-mandated counseling when somebody's found guilty of domestic violence, and these are often difficult cases to prosecute. There are relationships that are, people are often close to the person that has committed the domestic violence, and it's important that those people get support. We certainly don't want to see repeat offenses. We want to get help for the victim. We want to get help for the person who has committed the domestic violence, and also other family members. So I think it's important for those people to get help, and it's important for all the people in the judicial, in the criminal justice system to be involved and to play their appropriate role. As a judge, you have to be impartial and fair with the matters that are coming in front of you. If somebody's found guilty of that, then you want to do those things I talked about.
Okay.
Deterrent, get the individuals helped, so that those types of things don't happen again.
I know that it seems like when I read the police blotter every week, we have like 1 or 2 occurrences every week. Do you see it as a prevalent problem in the Mesquite area?
We do have some cases where people live here and that issue arises. Often it's instances where folks have come to have a good time at a casino, or they're coming to visit.
Mm-hmm.
And often it's because of something like alcohol or drugs, and what's intended as a fun trip turns out to be a very bad experience.
Yeah, I'd say party's over.
Right.
Okay. What about restraining orders in these kinds of situations? Often the victim, feels like she or he, actually, I'm seeing as much females being the perpetrator of domestic violence as I see men, according to the police blotter. But what about restraining orders, and under what circumstances do you issue them? Under what circumstances do you try to protect the victim as much as the law allows?
A good question. There are a couple of different types of restraining orders that someone can apply for.
Okay.
There's an emergency, which will be a temporary restraining order, and that can be issued for someone without a hearing. There's an application that's filled out, and Justice of the Peace would review that, and that would need to be reviewed within a day or so. I believe there's a day requirement there.
Okay.
And depending on what's there, and if there's sufficient evidence to indicate that there's domestic violence going on, Justice of the Peace can sign off on that, which can set a period of time where that person cannot have contact with the victim.
Mm-hmm.
A victim can come back and ask for that order to be extended for, I believe, up to a year. And at that second request, then there are requirements for notice to be provided. Even with the temporary order, notice will be provided to the person so they know that they aren't to contact them. Okay. But at the second hearing, the alleged perpetrator would have the opportunity to respond, and then the judge would review the evidence and make a decision on whether to extend that protective order.
Okay. Talk about some of the cases and how you would handle juvenile related cases where the kids are getting into some legal difficulties, things like that. I think the Justice of the Peace would hear some of those.
Justice of the Peace is going to have jurisdiction over cases that involve individuals who are adults.
Okay.
There is something called a juvenile hearing master that could, I believe Judge Dodd is also a juvenile hearing master and is appointed by the county to fill that position, in addition to his Justice of the Peace responsibilities. And in that capacity works with the Juvenile Public Defender's Office and the Juvenile DA's section
Mm-hmm.
in addressing those issues. And so it's separate from the Justice of the Peace position, but
okay.
It's a possibility that whoever's in the Justice of the Peace position, I would be interested in filling that role if elected. So to answer your question,
yeah,
I think it's important that you try and get these kids on the right track. It's important that you get somebody back in school. If there are drug issues, that you try and get somebody turned around before they go down the wrong path too far. And so rehabilitative efforts need to be made.
Mm-hmm.
You need to try and get them counseling if you know there's drugs or alcohol or something like that involved. You need to get them the help that they need so they can get turned around. Sometimes it's a matter of getting them in school and you know, having the person have to come back and bring their grades in. It can sometimes prove you know, having a judge do that can prove a good incentive for them to go to school. You know, perhaps if they don't do that, there's a requirement that they have to do more community service or something along those lines. So I think a judge can play an important role in helping these kids get their lives turned around.
Okay. You mentioned earlier some of the various legal entities in Vegas, such as the DA's office, the other courts in Vegas. And I would imagine, as the assistant city attorney, that you do have a lot of interaction with them already. How do you see the importance of being able to work with those other entities as far as the justice of the peace position?
Well, I believe it's important for our courts to be open and accessible, both to the citizens. Justice Court is the court closest to the citizens in Mesquite, so folks need to know, you know, how they can get for example, a small claims case in front of the court, and the court can provide that information. The Justice Court also needs to be accessible to the DA's office and the Public Defender's office, and so I would work with the different entities to make sure that we're scheduling the hearings and the times appropriately, that our law enforcement has access to the court so when they need to submit a search warrant application, that those can be submitted and timely heard. Things are presently set up on set days, and that schedule has worked well, and I think will work well in the future.
Okay. Now, as the assistant city attorney, should you win election as the JP, just for clarification, what's going to happen with your position with the city?
I would have to resign as deputy city attorney. There would be a conflict for me to try and proceed in both. My present position, I provide legal advice to different departments, including the police department, and I also prosecute cases in municipal court, and so I would not be able to continue to do that. So I'd resign from my current position if I were elected to fill the JP position.
Okay. And now let's talk a little bit about Judge Dodd is currently the municipal judge and the justice of the peace, even though those are actually two very separate positions.
Correct.
There's been some discussion about whether the same person should fill both positions, or there should be two different people in each of those. How do you look at that issue, and you know, what are your thoughts about either way?
Great question. State law requires that a municipality, like the one we have here in Mesquite, that they have a municipal court judge. Townships in Clark County are required to have a justice of the peace, and the law permits a justice of the peace to also be appointed to serve in the municipal court position. Now, that decision will ultimately be left to the city council to decide if they want to appoint the municipal court judge to be the justice of the peace. I would like to serve, if elected as justice of the peace, in the municipal court position. Judge Dodd's been able to successfully serve in both capacities and has done a good job doing so. As I've looked into the issue, there are presently, according to the Nevada Judicial Directory, 9 different justices of the peace who are serving as municipal court judges throughout the state.
Okay.
And that's permitted by law, so I think it's inappropriate to suggest that there is something wrong, or I mean, it's permitted by law. So,
what do you see as the advantage of having the same person in both positions?
I think there's definitely some efficiencies that can be achieved.
Like what?
We presently have one court chamber, and so if there were to be 2 different judges, we'd have to get an additional chamber. I think it could lessen the equipment that's required to for the judge. Judge is also required to attend training each year, and so that would cut down on costs for sending the judge to training if you're sending for one versus two. I also think a judge needs to be close to the community and understand the problems that a community faces. And Judge Dodd has been able to, in sitting in both positions, he's been able to see the different issues that are coming before him, and I believe that allows a judge to ultimately help people get the assistance that they need. If he's seen somebody in municipal court, seeing that he's dealt with them and helping them to get some drug counseling. He sees the same person in a different court. Certainly you still have to be fair and impartial in all your dealings, but if you understand that person's had some drug background, you may see there's a need for additional focus in that area.
So you're seeing a lot of synergy between the two positions, is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. Let's talk about some of your community involvement. And then we're going to segue right into some of your background and education, and I'm kind of leaving that to the end. Most people start with the beginning, but so talk about some of your community involvement, some of the things that you do with different groups or whatever.
Well, the first thing that comes to mind today is soccer day. I coach.
Yeah, we rescheduled it so you could get to the soccer game for your kids.
I coach a couple of my kids' soccer teams, and I really enjoy that. I've enjoyed coaching. I've got 5 kids, and we've lived in Mesquite for a little over about 4.5 years now. Really enjoy the community, and so we're involved with all their activities. Support them with different art programs that they're going to, athletics. I've enjoyed, over the years, I've had the opportunity to work with the Boy Scouts and helping them with their merit badges. Some of their different citizenship merit badges that they work on. There's a law merit badge. We've had some fun doing that.
Okay. Yeah.
Putting on some mock trials and helping them. Somebody gets to be the judge, somebody gets to be the prosecutor, the defense attorney, and we have some people serving the jury. And we've also I've been able to help in the elementary schools where they've done similar programs, and the kids do a great job, and it's a lot of fun. I've been, this past year, I've been a member of the Virgin Valley Historical Society, and it's been fun to see them put events together and have people come in and talk about the history of this great community.
Yeah. Okay. You've been here since 2008 when you moved into the assistant attorney position for the city. Talk about some of the background before that and your education.
I attended Bear High School in Tremont, Utah. I was the valedictorian there. I got a scholarship to Utah State University, graduated summa cum laude in political science, and was an outstanding political science student my senior year there. Ken and I, we met at Utah State and got married, and we moved out to Washington, D.C. with our oldest son, and we were there 2001 to 2003. Was there during 9/11. Some of the different things that were, definitely had an impact on me. I grew up with great parents who instilled in me desire to do service, but being back there during that time period also impacted me. I made a decision. I wanted to work in the public sector and to try and do something in my career that would have a positive impact.
Mm-hmm.
Worked for the Federal Trade Commission in DC, and then decided to go to law school. I attended the University of Minnesota, great law school in Minneapolis. And after graduating there with cum laude honors, I took a job in Las Vegas working for a large law firm.
Okay.
And it was a law firm where you had the opportunity to get a lot of experience fast. They put you to work. You had the opportunity to go to court, argue motions. We worked on cases in district court, worked on cases that were appealed to the Supreme Court. It really helped me improve my research skills and legal writing. But my heart was, like I mentioned earlier, in the public sector. So when I received an opportunity to come to Mesquite, we jumped at the opportunity. Ken and I are both from smaller communities And so this is a good fit for us. We enjoy raising our family here. Would you like me to go ahead and talk about what I do for the city now? Or?
Sure, yeah.
As a deputy city attorney, I've been primarily responsible for the criminal prosecution of cases in Mesquite. These are misdemeanor cases. Anything ranging from traffic to domestic violence and DUI cases would be some of the more serious cases that our office handles.
So you're actively involved in those kinds of cases from the opposite side of the bench
Right.
than you would be if you were elected.
Right.
Okay.
And I've learned a lot serving in the court here in Mesquite. Been able to work with members of the community who come forward as brave witnesses, businesses, law enforcement, and it's been a great experience to work to make our community a safer one. And I really admire those, especially the witnesses that come forward to ensure that people who commit crimes, that they're held accountable for their actions.
Mm-hmm.
Other responsibilities I have for the city have included help with civil litigation, preparing contracts, providing legal advice to members of employees of the city and elected city officials.
Mm-hmm.
Had the opportunity to work with drafting changes to our city code, and there's a lot of different issues that come up, and so it's been a good experience to be able to research a variety of different things. You never know what might come up during the week.
Yeah, it's kind of like the news business.
You bet.
You never know what the headline's going to be tomorrow until you put it out there. So, okay. Any other kind of last-minute details?
Well, I feel there's a couple of things that help me stand out in this race.
Okay.
First, I'm a Nevada lawyer. I work in the Nevada courts, and I work with Nevada law every day. And I believe that's something that will help me successfully step into the justice court position. As I mentioned before, I understand many of the issues that are facing our community, whether it be drugs or violence, or maybe even a veteran who's returned from overseas serving our country and has had trouble, maybe it's post-traumatic stress disorder or some other issue that has resulted in them being in the criminal justice system.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important that our justice of the peace understand the issues that our community is facing, and having worked with victims and law enforcement and businesses, I believe that will help me to fill in those shoes. I mentioned veterans. There's recent law that's provided for a specialty veterans court, and
I heard about that.
And a justice of the peace plays a role in making sure that you inquire as to a veteran's status. And if that person qualifies for that court, then you can get them the case transferred down to district court into that specialty court where they have resources to help that person through that. And if the person qualifies, completes their requirements, then they're able to have that case dismissed and possibly even sealed. And I really think it's important that we use those specialty courts and look to long-term solutions that will benefit our community. The last thing I mentioned, we talked about earlier, I'd like to serve the community on a full-time basis and use my background and skills to do that. And
Okay.
so if elected as Justice of the Peace, I'd also like to be considered to fill the municipal court position as well, because I do want to serve the community on a full-time basis.
Okay.
The Justice of the Peace position is not one that's going to take up all your time. Judge Dodd's
yeah.
been able to fulfill both of those successfully, and I'd like to serve that way as well.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much, Ryan. We appreciate your time today, and good luck with your kids' soccer game this morning.
Thank you, Barbara.
Okay. Thank you, Ryan.